So what I've noticed is there's a lot of videos out there talking about how to set up a tank and get a fish tank started, but very few videos out there telling you how to take care of it once you have it up and running. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo and you're watching Tazawa Tanks. For some of you that know me or know of my channel, you know that I do have an aquarium service business where I do take care of other aquariums, and I've made other videos in the past about servicing tanks, and I thought I would kind of include this particular video in kind of my beginner series, as a lot of people out there just don't know how to take care of a tank once they have it up and running, or what to kind of plan for before they set it up. So my first advice is very simple, and that is to keep it easy. What I mean by that is when you do have an aquarium, and regardless of whatever tank you have, whether it be a little 5-gallon betta tank or a shrimp tank to a 120-gallon cichlid tank or even something larger, it is going to require you to take care of it, to maintain it, to do water changes, check on the equipment, and it's good to know, kind of what you have to look forward to, and it's also equally important to just make sure that whatever you are doing, that it is as easy as possible so that you're not creating work that you really don't need to be doing. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is making sure that it is easy for you to move water. So anytime you have an aquarium like these ones here behind me, I have to move water out of the tank and I have to put water back into the tank. For this tank, I've got to do that twice a week. For this one, I do it a lot less. Well, I do it once a week and a lot less water out of it. But I'm still having to move water quite frequently out of these two tanks here beside me. With that, I want to make sure that when I'm moving the water that it's really easy to do, and I'm not kind of creating, unnecessary work where it's, causing me stress, or I'm, postponing doing maintenance on the tank because it's too much work. There are two methods that I will recommend now as far as moving water that will make it really easy for you. The first method is by using a submersible pump attached to some type of tubing. This is a submersible pump. The brand is just it's just like some generic brand. I got it at a hardware store. It's for a fountain. But you can use, there's all different kinds out there. There's some that are at the fish store, some at the hardware store. It's just a submersible pump, and you want to have something that you can stick underwater, attach a hose to it, plug it in, and have that pump water out of your tank. Now, to put water back into the tank, you can use that pump by putting a bucket of water underneath a spigot, turning it on and filling the water, then pumping that water with a pump in the bucket back into the tank. Or you can use something a lot easier, and that would be by using something like this product here, which is called a Python. With this, all you do is you connect this to your faucet, and it comes with an adapter so that it fits a lot of different types of faucets. And then you close the valve, turn the water on, and you can put water into your tank. And then you can also draw water out of your tank as well. If you are in a level area or a little bit of a decline, you can do that way as well. If you are going to buy one of these, I would recommend getting one with a longer hose. You don't want to have too short of a hose, because then you're going to have an issue with reaching that sink that might not be so close to your fish. And lastly, there are buckets. Now, I would say that if you can avoid buckets, you should. Buckets can be heavy, so if you think about a 5-gallon bucket full of water, that's probably going to weigh about 40 pounds. If you're lifting a lot of weights or something, 40 pounds doesn't really seem like a lot of weight, and it isn't for some people, while other people, don't lift weights or are not as strong and large, and 40 pounds is quite heavy. Regardless of whether you're strong or you're small, 40 pounds is 40 pounds, and when it's water, anything can happen. It can slosh around, it can spill, and you just don't want to get into carrying buckets. It is a hassle. If you are going to use buckets, I would only recommend buckets for smaller tanks. So if you have a 10-gallon tank or less, there's nothing wrong with using buckets. But if you're using, if you're doing larger tanks, if you have a 29-gallon tank or a 40-gallon tank, etc., 55, 75, etc., I would say, use the pump method in a hose, or use the Python method, because again, moving water in and out is going to happen on a frequent basis. And if you're carrying buckets, you're bound to spill it. You're going to get upset. You're going to make a mess. And unless you have some really small nano tank or something, I would avoid carrying buckets. The other thing to think about with buckets is, like for this tank as an example, if you have a big heavy 40-pound bucket of water and you have to lift that up and pour that into the tank, you know, depending on where your tank is situated, it might be kind of high. So again, buckets are not ideal. So again, when thinking about making it easy, make it really easy for you to move water out of your tank and make it really easy for you to put water back into your tank. So that will lead us right into water changes. If you do have an aquarium and you just set up your aquarium, you will have to do water changes on a frequent basis. Now the frequency is going to depend on the fish you have, how much food you're feeding your fish, do you have plants, what kind of filtration you have, etc., etc. There are a lot of different factors that are going to determine how frequently or infrequently you will need to do water changes, but regardless, there will be times that you do have to do water changes. In order to understand how often you're going to do water changes, you're going to need to be able to test the water. So get yourself a test kit like a master test kit, and then you can test the water for ammonia, nitrite, nitrates, and if your tank has been up and running for a while, it's really going to be the nitrates that you're looking for. And when you see those nitrates become a little bit elevated, you're going to want to do a water change. If you have a small bioload with small fish and not a lot of fish, it might be more infrequent, or you'll have to do a less amount of water. If you have a big cichlid tank with a bunch of hungry cichlids that eat a lot and poop a lot, you'll have to do it more frequently. If you have a planet tank and the plants are absorbing those nitrates and making your water cleaner essentially by, you know, taking those nutrients out of the water, then you might have to do it less often as well. Another thing that newer fish keepers are always battling, and that is algae. Part of maintaining a tank is controlling the algae. Now in some situations you might like the algae. Algae is not bad for a tank. In fact, it's a sign that the tank is healthy, and those algae that are in your tank are essentially helping to keep your water more balanced by removing the nitrates in your tank. The algae will act the same way as plants do in absorbing those nitrates and reducing the nitrate level of your tank overall. However, for a lot of people, algae can be unsightly. It's unsightly on your glass, it's unsightly on certain decorations. So if that is the case, you're going to want to be able to clean the glass. You can clean the inside of the glass with like an algae scraper, or you can get one of those mag floats where you can just kind of scrape it back and forth, and it will remove the algae that's on the surface or any kind of, you know, film that's on the surface. If you have decorations and you have algae on them, you might have to take those decorations out of the tank and take like a little brush or something and clean them off. But that's a real hassle, and you do want to avoid that. The way to avoid it is to control what the algae needs, and that is light and nutrients. So the algae is just like a plant, and in order for them to grow and thrive, they need light. So by simply changing the amount of light you have hitting your tank may reduce your algae. So let's say that you have your lights on all day and you turn them on at 9 in the morning and turn them off at 9 at night. That's a long time, and you probably will have some algae growing. But let's say that you go to school, you go to work, and you really don't need the lights on in your tank until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and maybe you want to enjoy them in the evening until you go to bed around 9 or 10. So then you could get like a timer, put the lights onto the timer, and then have the lights come on at 4 or 5 p.m. and then have them go off at 9 p.m. and then you can still enjoy your fish and have less light on your tank, resulting in less algae. Also with algae, the amount of food that you put in your tank is going to determine, you know, how much nutrients are in the tank for that algae. So if you're overfeeding, you're probably going to have some algae issues as well. The last thing I'm going to talk about is your equipment. If you're a newer fish keeper, you spent a lot of money in investing in your tank and all the equipment, you're going to have to make sure that you maintain it. That means making sure that everything's working and it's in proper order, that nothing is cracking or breaking. And some of the equipment that you purchase requires continual maintenance and service. As an example, if you have a canister filter, so let's say that you bought a tank and you set up this nice canister filter on it, that canister filter is going to require service. So before you purchase your tank and before you purchase that filter, make sure that you are able to maintain that filter and take that canister filter apart from time to time and clean it and service it and put it back together and get it running again. If you're unable to do that, you will have to find someone that can assist you or buy a different form of filtration that requires less maintenance. Also, from time to time, you will have equipment that will fail. It might be a heater that stops working, it might just shut off completely, or may stick on and won't shut off. You might have an impeller in some of your filtration. It might be like a power head or a hang on the back filter that might go bad or get stuck. So you're going to have to be able to understand what the situation is with that piece of equipment and how to fix it. If you're not able to fix it, you will have to have some type of plan to be able to replace that item, and you don't want to have that go for a period of time if it's something that's part of the life system. So for example, if you have a tank and the heater goes bad, you'll want to have an extra heater on hand so that in the instance that that heater goes bad, you can remove that heater, put in the new heater, and your tank, maintains a proper temperature. Obviously, if it's filtration, your fish are dependent on that filtration, so it is important to make sure that you have some type of backup filtration. I always like to make sure that I have multiple filtrations per tank. It doesn't mean that I'm over filtering and going, crazy with, a whole bunch of filters. It just means that I have a couple of systems that will ensure that I do have some type of water movement in the tank should one of my filters fail. On this tank, as an example, I've got a few different filters. That's because I have a huge bio load, so I have a sump and a canister and a hang on the back. But even this tank here behind me, I just have one canister filter that does the majority of the filtration. But let's say that canister filter failed. I still have an air stone in there on an air pump, so I still have water circulating and the surface tension being broken so that I do have that oxygen exchange so that the fish will continue to have oxygen. And I also have a power head. I have a couple power heads, but I have one power head on the other side that has a sponge pre-filter on that, so it's a sponge filter. So I do have water movement. I've got water breaking the surface through the air bubbles, and I have a sponge filter on my power head. So if something were to happen, and let's say one of those systems were to go down, I still have something that's operating and making sure that my tank is not going to die. These are just a few tips that I wanted to share with you guys that might help you in understanding the ongoing maintenance that is required in keeping fish tanks. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.